Welcome. In this second lecture in the series about external, in the module about external environments, we'll talk about Michael Porter. Michael Porter is a strategy professor from Harvard that came up with an idea of a book called Competitive Advantage, and he described this model that talks about the external environment and how organizations position themselves within the external environment, and it's called the Five Forces model. This is positioning of a company here is sort of in the center of this picture, and around it you see that you have the suppliers on the left, you have buyers on the right, your customers. Below you have new entrants that come into the marketplace, that is new companies that enter in and fight you in that marketplace. And at the top there you have what someone would say the substitute products or services, companies that aren't really in your industry, but they sell something that is quite similar to what you have. Just to give you an idea, in the telecommunications industry, when I was working in the long distance business with AT&T, we had new entrants coming in to the system, that is long distance carriers. At the time it was called MCI, and they were another carrier that was selling a product just similar to AT&T, and they would sell it, and that would be somebody that entered the marketplace, a new entrant, when AT&T originally was a monopoly. But in addition, you had wireless phones coming in, and that would be a substitute product. Like email would be a substitute as well, or texting would be a substitute for the kind of telephone service that we had before. So that's the idea of what's being described here. And in the center, of course, in this blue box, is the rivalry among the existing players. This is Walmart versus Target. Applebee's versus Panera Bread, that sort of thing. Those kinds of competitions that go on among people that are in the market or in that same industry. What you do when you use the Five Forces model for an analysis perspective, you look at each area and you think about, for example, okay, how much rivalry do we have in a business? Say you have a local bakery, you're running a local bakery and you're trying to come up with a strategy. You would say, okay, I'm on First Avenue, there's a bakery on Second Avenue, on Third Avenue. What do they sell? How are they doing? How much rivalry is going on in this particular marketplace? That's what you would try to understand. And of course, the rivalry would be strong if there were a lot of bakeries and the people in fact, there were more bakeries than you could need, and some bakeries would enter and leave and all of that sort of thing. And you would have people that were essentially always deciding which one to go to for their goods and services. You know, they were buying their pastries or whatever. You'd have strong rivalry. If you're the only one that was in a marketplace, and say you owned a particular kind of Danish that you made, and you had a recipe that everyone really liked, and no one else could really copy it because it was proprietary, you would have very little rivalry in that position, right? So that's how one thinks about just the competition in your marketplace. You also want to think about, can someone enter? You have a bakery. Can someone open a bakery across the street or two streets away? And will they, if they can enter it, is it easy to enter it? Usually, if it takes a lot of money to enter it, or if you're likely to be able to lower your prices and knock them off very easily, you compete very strongly with them, then you can, obviously, there's going to be a lower threat if you're able to knock them away, or if it's very expensive to enter that marketplace. If rent is really expensive, for example. There's a lot more material here that you can see and read through, but by and large it boils down to, is there a very high cost of entering, and that is barriers, are barriers high? And are the incumbents willing to and in a position to fight off someone coming in very, very aggressively? If I have to spend a lot of money to open the bakery, and the bakery somebody else does, and my bakery can lower prices and has specials and has very loyal customers, I could make it very difficult for that other bakery to survive. That's a low threat of entry if you're in that position. You also have the notion of substitutes. Maybe somebody comes in with an ice cream parlor that serves ice cream with some pastries, and it's not exactly a pastry shop, but it hits the broad idea of some sweets. And so that might be where people start moving in the direction of that ice cream related treat rather than a pastry. And that's the idea of substitutes. If there are a lot of substitutes out there, a lot of things that people can do, people are starting to open ice cream shops and yogurt shops and sweet cheese shops and whatever else, candy and all of that, then you have a lot of substitutes, and that substitute threat becomes more serious. You can think about that in any industry, by and large, but you obviously want to be thinking about your strategic position. Does the product you sell a unique product, or can people get the same kind of satisfaction based upon what you are offering? Bookstores are going through this right now. Hard physical books. People substitute e-readers and e-books for those. And that's very much of a threat. There's a great deal of substitution risk in the book selling business these days. In addition, you have suppliers, the strength of suppliers. If there's only one supplier, limited supply, control of supply, they have a lot of power, and they can get more value out of you by making the cost of supply higher. In other words, value gets transferred. You sell to the customers, but in order for you to get what you need to make for something for the customers, they siphon value to them. There's very few suppliers, and you have to negotiate with one or two people. If the limited quantity, the quality level of the particular product is very high, then you have control over that. You essentially monopolize it. Precious stones, diamonds, are an example of this, where a small number of companies control most of the legal diamonds in the world. So there's this notion of small number of suppliers. It used to be in the U.S. there were only 3 car companies before the Japanese and then the Koreans and all the other car companies came in. 3 main car companies. Suppliers of cars those car companies had, if they were selling to like a fleets to a rental company or something, they had a lot of negotiating power. But now there's the suppliers of the automobiles. But now companies, rental cars, can buy from many different companies, many different international companies and the like. So the supplier power has gone down in the transportation industries. Anything like that is the way you think about the supplier power. And of course, last is the buyer power. This one people tend to get confused about, so I'll just try to make this relatively straightforward. This is not you as an individual, can I decide to go somewhere else. I have the power to decide not to go see a Yankees game, right? But that doesn't mean that the buyer has power, because there's a lot of seats and a lot of people, and that seat will be filled if the Yankees are winning, right? I have no power. I say no, and I don't go, sure. But the buyers as a set don't have any power. If, however, the Yankees were trying to get some famous individual, Beyonce, to come to their game, then they're trying to get her to buy a ticket or whatever like that, and they're trying to negotiate the price. She's a really unique person. She has a lot of power as she's buying, because they want someone like Beyonce to be the customer, and there's only one of her. And so she would have a lot of power, and she would probably get in for free, which is why certain people that are good customers that have a lot of other values get in free. That's the individual example, which is not all of that generic. But when you think about it, if there's only one automobile company, like there used to be only 3 automobile U.S. companies in the 70s and 1960s, 1970s, someone who wants to sell, you got to sell either Ford, Chrysler, or General Motors is the only ones that can buy your product, and they have a lot of power. So most suppliers lost all of their value was transferred to General Motors in those days. Or Walmart does that. Suppliers to Walmart. If you sell through Walmart, you get a large distribution. A lot of companies want them to be a customer. They sell their products to Walmart. Walmart has a lot of power as a buyer. So don't think about me as an individual, I can say yes or no. That's not the point here. The point here is if the supplier is trying to get, or if the business is trying to get customers, Does one individual customer have an ability to affect the price and say, I'll buy it at 50% of that? And generally, individuals in stores and Target or Walmart, they can't affect the price. They have no power. However, if someone is trying to buy you and you're the only person that is interested in buying this particular product, you're the only one that is going to pay for this product, then you have a lot of power to negotiate the price down. That's the idea of buyer power. So you want to be thinking about that as you're developing these ideas. So that's the 5 forces model, probably the primary thing that people talk about when they describe strategy in the external environment in business. But there are other models, and we're going to continue them, and you should know about all of them because it's kind of the common language of business. Next lecture, we'll talk about the strategic groups map as a conceptual model for doing strategic analysis of the external environment. We'll see you then.